Hello and thank you for watching this video. In this video, you will learn about the relationship between climate and biomes, as well as information about each major land biome. Imagine that you are taking part in an around-the-world scientific expedition. On this expedition, you will collect data on the typical climate and organisms of each of Earth's biomes. A biome is a group of ecosystems with similar climates and organisms. There are 6 major biomes: rainforest, grassland, deciduous forest, desert, boreal forest, and tundra. Some of these biomes have multiple names, so you'll learn those too. So how did we decide these 6 biomes? By their climate, of course. Climate is the general representative conditions of an area, especially temperature and precipitation. The average annual temperatures and rainfall or snowfall determine what kinds of plants can grow in that area and what kinds of animals can live there. This means that each biome has different organisms. First, we have the rainforest. This red line going across this world map shows the equator. And so you can see the green areas that are rainforest. And the green areas, notice, are all very close to the equator, where it happens to be very warm. So rainforests are typically located near the equator. They also have large amounts of rainfall, over 150 centimeters per year. And imagine this is why it's called a rainforest. It is a forest that has a lot of rain. Also, rainforests tend to be very hot and humid. And also, rainforests are the most diverse of the land biomes. This means that they have more species of plants and animals than all other biomes combined. There are lots and lots and lots of different types of plants and animals that live in rainforests. Rainforests often look somewhat like this. There are lots and lots of plants, especially things that are very viney. There are lots and lots of tall trees, and not pictured, there are lots and lots of different animals and things like bugs and monkeys and all sorts of awesome stuff. Next, we have grasslands, also known as prairies or savannas. The orangish-brownish parts of the map indicate where savannas and grasslands and prairies are typically located. Notice how they aren't super close to the equator, not like where the rainforests were. They're a little bit further north or a little bit further south. So that means that they are in the middle latitudes, just a bit above and below the equator. They have moderate amounts of rainfall, so kind of in the middle. Not a lot and not a little, just somewhere in the middle, somewhere between 25 to 120 centimeters per year. They tend to have a hot and rainy season, so part of the year it does get hot and rainy, but other parts are cold and dry. Most of the types of plants that are there are mostly grasses and non-woody plants. And so the woody plants are those that would be trees. So meaning that they have mostly non-woody plants means that they don't have that many trees. Here is a picture of what a grassland or prairie or savanna might look like. Notice that there's lots and lots of grass and some trees here and there, but mostly grasses and shrubs and bushes. Next, we have the temperate/deciduous forest. So it's got a couple different names. And that orange arrow that you see there indicates where Michigan is. So we are pretty familiar with Michigan weather. We live in a temperate forest or a deciduous forest. And notice how the areas are those that are, again, above and below the equator, most of it being above. But if you look down at Australia and New Zealand, in the lower right-hand side, that also has some temperate and deciduous forest there. So again, it's those middle latitudes that tend to be above and below the equator. And the temperate and deciduous forests also get moderate rainfall, similar to the prairie or grassland, but can sometimes have more than some prairies and grasslands. Our rainfall in the temperate and deciduous forests is mostly more than 50 centimeters per year. There are also a very wide range of temperatures, which we know living in Michigan. We have very, very hot and humid summers, and we also have very, very cold and snowy winters. So the range of temperatures in temperate forests is really, really big. It can get really, really, really hot, and it can also get really, really, really cold. Also, part of the reason why they are called deciduous forests is because they contain a lot of deciduous trees. Deciduous trees are the types of trees that shed their leaves and grow new ones each year, similar to oaks and maples. So these are contrasted with the type of trees that have needles, and those needles don't fall off. So deciduous trees are those that have leaves that do fall off and then regrow in the spring. Here's a picture of what a typical temperate or deciduous forest might look like. This is probably what it would look like in the summer months when it's nice and warm and there's lots of plants and lots of trees with leaves. And also there are pine trees that also have needles too, but lots and lots of deciduous trees. Next, we have desert. So you can see from the map that the desert is the yellowish areas. And notice how it's somewhat close to the equator, but notice how most of them are not quite on the equator, typically above and below. So they're in those middle latitudes. Deserts are categorized by having very, very, very little rainfall. So there's less than 25 centimeters of rainfall per year. That's essentially the definition of desert. Now, when we think of desert, we usually think of really, really hot, but there are actually places that are called cold deserts. So don't think of deserts as being only the places with really, really, really high temperatures. Their definition is that they have very, very little rain or snow. So they have less than 25 centimeters of rainfall per year. And as I kind of mentioned, is that deserts actually have really extreme temperatures, both hot and cold. Deserts are especially dry. The air is very, very dry, kind of like opposite of humid like we have in our summer months. And when there's less moisture in the air, that allows for more extreme temperature changes. And also with the ground there as well. So it oftentimes gets really, really hot during the day, but then it actually gets really, really cold at night, even in deserts that are typically really, really hot. And as I mentioned, there are some deserts that are literally called cold deserts, where they are not very hot. So in deserts, there can be extreme temperatures of both very hot and very cold. Also, organisms that live here are very special. They need to have special adaptations or special features about their bodies that help them to survive the very, very small amounts of rain, as well as the very extreme temperatures of both hot and cold. So organisms that live here, you're not going to find in other parts of the world because they have special adaptations that help them just live in the desert to survive the little amounts of water and the extreme temperatures. Here is a picture of what the typical desert might look like. Of course, lots of cacti and lots of rocky area, not a whole lot of grass, some shrubs, things like that. Typical desert. Next, we have the taiga or boreal forest. So this has two different names. It's not called a taiga forest. The taiga is just the taiga, and then the other name is boreal forest. So the red areas of the map show us where the boreal forests are. Notice how they're very far north, much further north of the equator. So boreal actually means northern. So we're talking about the northern areas of Earth where it gets really cold. So these are the dense forests up in the northern hemisphere. So lots and lots of trees. It is very dense here. And we're not talking about the furthest north. We're not quite there yet. We're talking about like further north of us, but there's still plenty of trees. So it's these dense forests in the northern hemisphere. Precipitation can vary. It can get as low as 20 centimeters per year, which is kind of like desert territory, but it can also get much, much higher and go up to 200 or more centimeters per year. So these areas can be very rainy and very snowy depending on where they are. So oftentimes these places are characterized as having cold, snowy winters and rainy and fairly warm summers. So just like in Michigan, it can get really hot here. So their summers can actually be pretty warm and pretty nice. I'd probably like going up there in the summer months. So these places typically have what we call coniferous trees. So not deciduous trees, the ones that have leaves that fall off. These are coniferous trees. So these are the ones that have leaves that are kind of like needles, and their seeds are produced in cones rather than in fruits, like we're thinking fruit trees or nuts. This is a picture of a typical taiga or boreal forest. So oftentimes these areas can be kind of mountainous. Notice there are lots and lots of coniferous trees, those pine trees there. There might be some nice lakes and rivers, and there's some snow up on those mountains there. So this would be a very nice taiga or boreal forest. All right, and lastly, we have the tundra. Oops, I got a little ahead of myself here. Sorry about that. Here is the tundra. And the tundra is the very, very, very cold areas furthest north, up past the boreal forest or the taiga. So you can see that greenish yellowish color there. And very far north of the equator. And also, tundras are known for having very little rainfall, just like the desert. So there's not a lot of rain, not a lot of snow, very, very small amounts. So that's what makes it similar to the desert. But what makes it different from a desert and why they have separate definitions is that the soil is frozen. And this is called permafrost. So tundras and deserts are similar because they both have very little rainfall, but they are different because the tundra has frozen soil. So if a place has very little rainfall, it's called a desert if it does not have frozen soil, and a tundra if its soil is frozen, and that's called permafrost. So as you can imagine, the tundra is extremely cold. So I'm sure the summer months are somewhat bearable, but I imagine the winters are awful. I wouldn't want to go there. Also, the tundra is the biome that has the least amount of organism diversity. So there are very, very few types of plants and very, very few types of animals because the organisms that live here have to be especially suited to very, very little amounts of water and very, very cold temperatures. Not very many organisms can survive here. So the types of plants that you might see, though, are things like mosses and grasses and maybe some small trees. And the types of organisms that live here are mostly insects, some types of birds, maybe some types of mammals here and there. And this is a picture of what the tundra might look like. This is probably more in the summer months rather than the winter, because you can see there are plants here. But yeah, during the summer months, it's very, very snowy and, oh, well, not very snowy because there's not very much precipitation. So notice that there's some snow up on the mountains up there, but not a lot of snow on the ground, though there could be depending on the precipitation. Yeah, this is the typical tundra. You might see some caribou as a type of mammal that might live up here.